Hello everyone. In this video we look at the two other important aspects in the topic chemical reactions and equations, which are corrosion and rancidity. Now corrosion is one of the common observations that we make in terms of the metals as well as substances, even polymers and synthetic materials also they do get corroded. So some of the common observations that we make around us are, if you look at the copper vessels, we see that the copper vessels can actually become green over a period of time. We'll see there is a pale green color kind of an coating that is getting formed, and this happens when these copper vessels are exposed to the air. So they will be turning into this green color, and the green color is because of the reaction of the copper with the moisture in the air and gases like CO2 which are present in the air, where we will be forming a mixture of copper carbonate and copper hydroxide. So this mixture is the reason for the green color formation on the copper vessels. Even if you look at silver ornaments, after a while when they are freshly made, they will be shiny and lustrous. After a while we'll see that they will actually turn into black, and this is because silver will be reacting with the hydrogen sulfide which is present in the atmosphere, and this will be forming silver sulfide, and the silver sulfide is the reason for the black color layer formed on the silver ornaments. So this is another example of corrosion that we will be observing around us. And one very common observation on corrosion is rusting. So rusting is basically iron when it is exposed to the atmospheric moisture. It will react with moisture and oxygen present in the air, and it will be forming hydrated iron oxides, and that's the reason why we see this color on the iron objects. This is very common phenomena that we'll observe. Even for a couple of days, if we keep an iron object outside, you'll see that it will automatically change the color. So these are some of the common observations we make in terms of the metals getting degraded. So we can call it as the metals are getting degraded. And corrosion as such is defined as any process which is involving the deterioration or degradation of the metal components. But as we have discussed, the corrosion can be also talked in terms of the synthetic materials or polymers also. So it need not be limited to just the metals. So we can mainly talk about corrosion in terms of metals, where the process where they are getting deteriorated or degraded is what we will be calling as corrosion. And if we look at what are some of the common reasons for the corrosion, so most of the metals they get corroded when they are in contact with water or the moisture of the air, when they are in contact with acids and bases. So when they are in contact with acids, they undergo corrosion to a more extent than when they are in contact with bases. It can even happen when they are in contact with salts, oils, some aggressive metal polishes, and other chemicals. So these are the main reasons for the corrosion to happen. And there can be even corrosion happening when certain gaseous materials, like the vapors of acids, formaldehyde gas, ammonia gas, and sulfur containing gases, they can also cause corrosion. Like if you look at the corrosion of sulfur, it is caused by hydrogen sulfide. So it is the sulfur containing gas. So these are the reasons for the corrosion to happen. And the factors that will mainly influence the corrosion are, one is the reactivity of the metal. So generally the less reactive metals, they undergo corrosion to a lesser extent. More reactive metals, they will undergo corrosion to a more extent. And presence of moisture and atmospheric gases like CO2 and SO2, they will enhance corrosion. So if you have an surrounding which has less moisture content and absence of these gases, then definitely the corrosion will be lesser. And presence of impurities is another factor that will affect the corrosion. Strains in the metal is another factor that will also affect the corrosion. And presence of electrolytes are basically the substances which when dissolved in water they will be able to produce ions. So that way the presence of electrolytes will be able to enhance the reactivity of the metal, thereby the corrosion process will be enhanced because of the presence of the electrolytes. And strains in the metal, so when a metal is being strained, like it is being deformed or strained, then in that case the chance of corrosion will be higher. And the ideal way to stop the corrosion or reduce the corrosion or prevent the corrosion will be to make sure that we have factors that are not in favor of a corrosion, but that will inhibit the corrosion phenomena. Like we try to ensure that the surrounding doesn't have moisture content. We try to ensure that the metal is not under strain and there is no presence of any electrolyte as such. So by that we will be able to inhibit the level of corrosion. And since corrosion damages the metals, it is obviously important to prevent the corrosion in most of the cases. And the common methods that are used to prevent corrosion are one, for metals like iron, we can coat the surface of the metal with another less reactive metal like zinc, and this will be like a protective coating. So we can apply a protective coating of zinc on the metal where we can prevent the direct contact. So if you have an iron rod, so we keep a coating of zinc on top of it. It will prevent the direct contact of the iron with oxygen and the moisture. And this coating with zinc is what we call as galvanizing. So galvanization is a process where we'll coat metals like iron with zinc in order to prevent the rusting or corrosion of iron. And another way to protect the metals is by forming a very thin layer of corrosion resistant metals. Like as we discussed, lesser the reactivity of the metal, they do not undergo corrosion much. So we have metals like chromium, platinum and gold. Of course platinum and gold will be expensive, but platinum and gold are almost chemically inert. So if you form a thin layer of these materials or these metals on top of iron or any metal, then this will completely prevent the contact of the iron with again the oxygen and the moisture. And this thin layer of coating is usually done by the method of electrolysis, which we call as electroplating. So what will usually happen is we take the iron object on which we need to do the coating as an electrode, and we perform the electrolysis. So the metal which we are trying to have as a layer will get deposited on the surface of this electrode. So this method is what we call as the electroplating method, and this will form a very thin layer. Obviously these metals are expensive, so we cannot form like a very thick layer. We'll be forming a very thin layer in order to prevent the corrosion. And one of the cheaper alternatives is coating the surfaces with paints. So suitable paints they can be applied onto the metal surface in order to prevent it from the exposure with the moisture and the air. So these are common methods that are used to prevent the corrosion. And of course on top of all this, if we can limit the factors that will enhance the corrosion, then definitely the corrosion can be inhibited. Let's look at this illustration. There are two iron pillars, out of which one is located in the coastal area and the other is in the town. Now after few months, one observed the pillar in the coastal area corroded early. We have to give what is the reason. So if you look at the two pillars, so one pillar obviously we have it in the town, and the other pillar we have it in the coastal area. So coastal area would mean that there is obviously the sea or ocean, and the atmosphere will contain lot of moisture. So the breeze over there will contain lot of moisture, and this moisture will be the reason for the high level of corrosion of the pillar which is in the coastal region. Whereas the pillar that is in the town will not have the atmospheric air having so much of moisture. So that is the reason why we see that even the metal objects which are closer to the coastal region, they do get corroded earlier than the objects that are farther from the coastal region. Next, we move into something which is interesting to us. If you look at the packaged foods, especially the chips, most of us might have it on a regular basis also. Whenever we buy a bag of chips, what we see is it will never be full, and we'll be thinking as to why it is always half full. So any chips packet that you buy, it will never be full. So you'll see that there is some gas that they are having inside the packaging. So we'll see what is that gas also in some time, but the observation is it will never be full. And the other observation, I'm sure a lot of us would have experienced this. When we cut apples freshly, we'll see that they have the fresh color. And if we don't eat them right away and keep them as it is open, we'll see that they'll be forming a kind of grayish, or rather brownish kind of an tint. So we'll see a brown color tint that is forming on the apples, and we'll also see what is the reason for this to happen. The third observation that we do in case of these food items is that whenever we look at pickle jar, what we see is the pickle jar will be obviously filled with oil, as we can see over here, and also the lid will be very tightly kept. So you have seen people even actually keep some polythene kind of and covering in order to make sure that no air goes in or comes out. So what could be the reason for this? So these are some of the things that we keep observing around us, and the answer for this is in the concept of rancidity. So what is rancidity? And rancidity is one of the most common observation that we do in case of the food items, where the fats and fatty acids which are in the food items, they undergo deterioration because of the oxidation. So most of the food items, they do contain the saturated fats, which we call them as fats, and unsaturated fats we call them as oils. So oil is a common name for the unsaturated fats. Saturated fats we generally call them as fats, and these are common ingredients of most of the food materials, and they do get oxidized when they are exposed to the oxygen in the atmosphere, and this oxidation basically destabilizes these molecules and makes it possible for other odd chemical reactions to start. So in the food item, the other odd chemical reactions will be starting as a result of this. And what we finally perceive as an observation is that we see a unpleasant change in the flavor or odor of the food, and this is what we'll be commonly referring as rancidity. So what we call as rancidity is an unpleasant change in terms of the flavor or odor of the food, and this happens because of the oxidation of fats and oils present in the food materials, and as a result of the oxidation there will be some unwanted chemical reactions that can be happening inside the food material. Now there can be some factors that will speed up this activity, in sense that they will be able to cause rancidity to a higher level. So generally, if you look at the unsaturated fats, the oils, they are more susceptible to oxidation than the saturated fats. So between the two, the unsaturated fats, which we call as oils, they will be more susceptible for the oxidation. Means if we have food materials that mainly contain oils, then they are more susceptible for getting the rancidity. And in terms of factors that will accelerate the oxidation, so if you have trace metals like iron, zinc, or we have salt, we have light, we have bacteria, we have water and molds, all of them, they will be able to accelerate the fat oxidation. Like in fact, if you look at the reason why the pickles are filled with oil is because to prevent any moisture to come into contact with the food material, and also to inhibit the molds. And obviously, if we are trying to store food, and food processing industry being one of the largest industry, and we nowadays are mostly relying on packaged foods. So while we do consume a lot of food at home, in comparison to the developed countries like in US or UK, where they will rely a lot on the packaged food. So the packaged food is one of the very prominent industries now, and uh, they need to find ways in which these oxidation can be retarded. And one of the common methods is by the use of antioxidants. Antioxidants are basically the compounds that inhibit the chemical reactions with oxygen, and basically the oxidation, they will prevent this oxidation. That's why they are called as antioxidants. The common compounds that are used as antioxidants are BHT, butylated hydroxytoluene, we can remember these names, BHA, butylated hydroxyanisole, vitamin E and vitamin C. These are used as the antioxidants. And we can use spices such as sage and rosemary also. And we can use airtight wrapping, and a wrapping that can prevent the entry of light. So we'll see that most of the times the packaging, they will coat the packaging, it will not be transparent, so it will prevent the entry of light into the packet. So the airtight and the wrapping which can prevent the entry of light is something that can also inhibit the oxidation. And some high fat foods, that such as potato chips, they are packaged by having the food items flooded with the nitrogen gas. So this is the gas that I was mentioning about. The container of the chips packet will be having nitrogen gas filled, and by that way what they are able to ensure is, in the packet there is no air, because even air contains oxygen. So the packet doesn't contain air, it contains only nitrogen. And we'll see that it will be also covered with a coating where it will be able to prevent the light from getting entry into the package. So the packaging of chips packet, especially the potato chips packet, what we get from the market, we'll see that it will be having covered in such a way that there will be a prevention of light from getting entry into the package, and also the gas that is there is a nitrogen gas, thereby the chance of oxidation will be totally removed. So these are some of the methods that are used for the retardation of the oxidation happening. So the methods are commonly, one is the use of antioxidant, spices, and using a wrapping which can prevent the light as well as the air from getting into the package. And for such materials which have high fat content like potato chips etc., we can use a nitrogen gas packaging. So these are the methods to prevent the rancidity. Thank you.